What's up, guys? So let's talk about that 18 by 20 pure strike that I got a little bit acquainted with. So here it is. Haha, just kidding, it's not. I actually returned the racket. I no longer have the demo anymore, so I don't have that racket for this review necessarily, but I do have some playtest footage of me hitting with it. And unfortunately, I have some better playtest footage that I deleted because I thought I had already made the video I wanted to make using that footage. And then immediately after deleting it, I was like, oh, wait, I needed that. So I don't have the playtest footage that I want, but I have some playtest footage of me hitting some okay balls, but also struggling with the racket. And maybe that's more honest, I guess, to the purpose of this video, because I really wanted to express why I won't be switching or really considering the Pure Strike 18 by 20. But that racket also fits into a category of 18 by 20s that sort of frustrate me. I made a recent video about how 18 by 20s are just so often like way too heavy, the swing weight's too high. And why is it that every time there's an 18 by 20 version of a 16 by 19 racket, they immediately just add like 10 to 15 grams of weight, and also the swing weight jumps up like 15 points? Like, why, just because now it has an extra cross string and 2 extra mains, is the racket like a whole level or 2 harder to use? So frustrating. Anyway, I got one comment on that video actually that made me think, and it's a good comment. He says, it would be great if the 18 by 20 and the 16 by 19 were basically identical minus the string pattern. And that way you could really determine for yourself if you prefer the 18 by 20 string pattern or the 16 by 19. And that's a great point, because when you have a racket that has a denser string pattern, but it's also a lot heavier and the swing weight is a lot higher, it's like, well, maybe you didn't like that racket, or maybe you did like that racket because of those factors and it didn't really have to do with the string pattern. So yeah, that's another thing I would like to say, is that it would be great if the rackets were identical besides the string pattern. So I don't know why they don't do it that way. It's very frustrating for me, but again, let's focus on this Pure Strike 18 by 20. I have my rant in that video if you guys want to watch it, but there's another little piece of that rant. So here's some interesting facts. The Wilson shift that I'm hitting with right now, the swing weight is actually several points higher than my Pure Strike 18 by 20 was. Now, despite that, this one is actually a couple points more headlight, but this racket is just night and day easier for me to swing. It's heavier and the swing weight is actually higher, but I'm able to just generate much more topspin with this racket. I'm able to whip it around and over a ball in a way that I was never really able to get the Pure Strike to do. So here's some other things I didn't really care for regarding the Pure Strike. So first of all, I really felt like it enforced almost that you hit kind of through the ball. I had some really heavy topspin balls that almost felt like the racket was just torsionally unstable, right? So I'm coming at the ball like this, really hard, and I could feel the whole racket face just kind of flex and twist a little bit. It just didn't feel that stable. I think it's one of those rackets that just gets a lot of its stability from the weight. And it felt really good just plowing straight through a ball. I think that racket almost specialized in that type of a shot. But for really heavy driving topspin shots, I just really felt like it's not that good at doing that. It doesn't want to swing that way. And when I actually manage to, it doesn't really want to go through the ball in that way either. Now, the main reason that I was attracted to that racket in the first place at all is because the string bed is so dense. I've made a lot of content comparing the string density of seemingly identical string patterns to actually reveal which one is actually more dense. So that is something that I really focus on when picking rackets or trying rackets. So the Wilson Shift caught my attention because it has 10 throat holes. This is a racket that is very, very dense in the mains and pretty open in the crosses. And this is the 315, it's an 18 by 20. This is a reasonably dense string bed, even for an 18 by 20, especially in the mains, right? But the Pure Strike is even more dense. I think the mains are pretty much identical. I did a video on that, but the crosses are so dense. And the reason I like a dense string bed is just because there's a lot of control elements that come with that, but it's really just about reducing the stress on each individual string, taking more time to break the string bed, etc. The less I have to string a racket, the better, essentially. And as long as that doesn't eat into the other qualities I want from a racket, great. I want a dense string bed. So yeah, long story short, the Pure Strike 18 by 20 was really one of the densest 18 by 20 string patterns, or string patterns period, that I've ever seen on a racket. And I've compared a lot of 18 by 20 side by side, as you can see in some of my shorts. But unfortunately, the racket really just doesn't play how I want it to play at all. And I feel like the shots that it specializes in aren't really my type of shots most of the time. But I also feel like the type of shot where you're plowing straight through the ball, I can do that fine with the Wilson Shift. Like, is it a little bit more shaky on those types of shots? Yeah, sure. But that's just an adjustment thing. you can adjust to hit that shot. Really, for me, I prefer this type of racket because I have so much shape that I can put on the ball. I can basically throw a curveball. I can do these disgusting slices. Pretty heavy topspin ball that is still a lob and it'll pull back in because of the amount of spin I'm able to generate. And those are just all options that I do not have with the Pure Strike 1820 at all. Those are just gone from my game. And yes, I know that some people are going to think it's the player, not the racket, but I wanted to make the point, and I said this earlier, that this racket is actually higher in swing weight and it's also heavier. The only difference really on spec paper is that the balance is a couple points more headlight, but that and among some other qualities about the frame just open up a whole other dimension of my tennis that is really important to how I play and how I want to play. And the Pure Strike just takes all that away, but it gives me this one shot that is kind of easier to hit, but just requires that you sort of hit it like that every time. So sure, it's the player, not the racket, but that's not the way that I want to play tennis. And I think there might actually be something to say about the torsional stability of that racket. This Wilson Shift markets having torsional stability, but the Pure Strike, I almost feel like it's just not there. The EZone 98 is another good example of a very torsionally stable racket, and it's another one that I consider to be a secret spin monster, whereas the Pure Strike really isn't. Yeah, I've hit with a lot of rackets, and I just haven't felt the racket face twist quite like that. And that was really true when I had those 16 gauge Hyper Gs on that Pure Strike 1820, which is absolutely not the type of string that you should put on there. I don't think you should ever put a 16 gauge string in an 18x20. And if you do, you probably want to string it like 45 or lower. I don't think that's how I got my demo. So anyway, I cut those strings out and I put restring 0 in there, which is my favorite string. Get 10% off in the link below. And I think I strung it at like 44, 45 pounds. And I think that was a much better feel than the Hyper G was, but I still felt a lot of the qualities that I'm talking about I didn't like, such as that twisting racket face on contact. Now that actually felt a lot less prevalent with the 0 in the racket. And I think that's because a thinner string, lower tension just allowed it to pocket the ball a little bit more. But I still felt that just floppy racket face. And it's really frustrating because my handle is going one way, but the racket face is twisting another. So among a bunch of variables, that was one of the things that just felt like it was not allowing me to shape my ball. The harder I wanted to hit and the more I wanted to kind of brush my racket face over the ball to give it the shape that I want, the racket face just kind of kept bending and flexing and twisting. So it really felt like the only way that I could hit a super heavy ball was to just flatten out my shot more. And yeah, that racket was great at doing those kinds of shots. I mean, I just really penetrated through the court, but not every ball should be hit that way in my opinion. And that's just not the kind of tennis that I want to play, but to each their own, of course. These are just my opinions and my observations on that racket. So I guess my point is if you're a pretty topspin heavy player and you like a lot of variation in your game, I'm not sure that the Pure Strike 18x20 is the racket for you. But on top of that, the range of players that I think are able to access that racket's potential is pretty slim because the swing weight is high. I mean, we're talking like RF97 categories. The swing weight is a little bit above 330 and, quality control differences. It could end up being like 335, almost 340. So yeah, my point is that racket is already in a league of players, I think, that is already very narrow. And then the type of play style that the racket almost seems to beg that you play is also very narrow. I just don't really know who that racket is exactly for. I know Dominic Thiem endorses it, and I know that he's a really strong player, like just as far as players on the tour go, he's a pretty buff guy. And it seems like he hits with pretty heavy topspin. But then again, I'm not sure that this is actually the racket that he's playing with. So again, whatever the pros are doing, you can't take too seriously anyway. All right, well, anyway, those are my thoughts on the Pure Strike 18x20. And as far as my 18x20 journey goes, that rules out a lot of options. So I know there's some new ones coming out that I am excited about. There is the Gravity Pro coming out. I look forward to trying that. So I will be trying some more rackets in the future. Some I'll be trying just for the sake of reviewing, such as this Head Radical Pro. So stay tuned for that review. I actually like this racket though, and the string pattern is comparable to the EZone 98. So, there's some potential there. Stay tuned, subscribe, like the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. And if you guys have any questions or comments, just leave them in the comments below. I try to get to everybody's comments, and definitely be sure to check out Restring 0. I do this in a lot of my videos, but just look at that snapback. It's insane. It's insane. Massive topspin, great durability, great tension maintenance. Get 10% off and try my favorite string of all time. All right, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.